So I'm a progressive Christian pastor. I went to seminary, and all of those years of schooling, we learned all of the different models of atonement. We read books and heard lectures about what the cross meant and why it happened. The one atonement model that most of us know is the PSA theory, or penal substitutionary atonement. You all know that one. It's the one where God is mad because we couldn't live up to the standards God made, so God became one of us and God killed God's self in order to appease God's wrath. Right? Makes sense? It's what we all learned in Sunday school growing up. It's what we've sung songs about. It's what most people on Good Friday are crying so much about when they look at the cross. But that idea is far from the only one. And it's not even the oldest one. And it might even be the one that has the least biblical justification for it. In fact, that idea is really a leftover from medieval Western Roman Catholic theology. I mean, the priests who wrote down these ideas that came up with that atonement theory, they were the ones who wrote the penal codes for their society. And I don't know if you know a lot about medieval history, but in medieval history, everything was punishable by death, right? You stole some bread, dead. You yelled at your neighbor too much and they got some weird form of gout, dead, right? So many crazy laws. And we've all heard the cliche that everything looks like a nail to a hammer. But these priests, these people in charge of caring for the souls of those around them, were basically lawyers. So wouldn't it make sense that everything to a lawyer kind of looks like a legal proceeding? But the authors of the Gospels, they weren't lawyers. Even Paul, who in his own way was a religious lawyer before his conversion, didn't see Good Friday as a legal proceeding between an angry God, Satan, and Jesus. So what is it that's going on Good Friday? In Mark, which is the earliest written gospel that we know of, he sets it all out, right? He lets us see, if we have eyes to see, what's really going on. Jesus is put on trial because he started a non-violent insurrection of the poor and the outcast. And doing this, Jesus challenges the power of Rome and their collaborators, of the religious elites in the temple. And we can see that in the charges brought against Jesus. Jesus is claimed to have been saying that he was king of the Jews. But in the Roman Empire, there was no king but Caesar. Pilate uses that snarky accusation against Jesus, and far from a shrinking violet, Jesus responds in defiance towards Pilate. The powers and the elites of the temple, the religious collaborators with empire, they ask for a violent revolutionary to be released over Jesus, who brought a revolution of peace, inclusion, and love. Why do they do that? Because they understand that what Jesus is doing is way, way more dangerous. He told the marginalized, the people who were pushed over and stepped on and cast out in their society, he told the marginalized that their lives matter. So he is sent to his death for it. He is mocked by Rome and his own people alike. His friends betray him, deny him, and abandon him, except for those faithful ones who had been the most marginalized in their society. When he dies, the author of Mark uses a literary device of darkness rolling over the land, which readers of the Hebrew Bible would have known as a sign of mourning and judgment. And then something else happens. The temple, there's a curtain that's torn in two that separated the people from the Holy of Holies. It was where God was supposed to live, and only one person could go in there once a year, and it's torn in two. This, again, is more than a reporting of history. It is a real symbol that the control and the myth of who controls our access to God has been forever removed. So on the cross, the power of the religious elites to keep others from God, to keep others outside of being in God's presence, to tell people they were less than to God, that they couldn't go to God, is destroyed. But another power is destroyed as well. You see, there's this remark of the centurion that watched Jesus' death, that presided over his execution. The remark of the centurion at the cross is a symbol of Rome's defeat by the loving act of solidarity that Jesus performs on the cross. You see, only Caesar was supposed to be the Son of God. But in this nonviolent act of resistance and defiance, Jesus sways even the heart of someone who had given his whole life to Caesar, had given his whole life to empire, to producing peace through the sword. Power and dominance made peace. The act of defiantly going to his death, Jesus conquers the power of empire as well. So from the author of Mark's perspective, what is happening on the cross is not just the death of Christ for a tally of individual sins, but it is something more universal. Another way to say that is, it is not my sins on the cross, but it is sin itself that is conquered there. It is not just my sins that are taken on the cross, but it is the idea, the power of sin in and of itself that gets conquered on the cross. You see, the all too common human reality of systems of domination sentence Jesus to death, and in his dying, he has laid waste to their power. So why then have we always been taught that the cross is about our own moral failings? So why then have we always been taught that the cross is about our own moral failings and about changing God's mind about us instead of about God changing our minds about God? Well, the truth is that penal substitutionary atonement is safe. If Jesus was only securing us a ticket to heaven, then we can do whatever we want on earth. If Jesus was only calling out our own personal moral failings, then we have no need to push for a more just and equitable society where we declare things like Black Lives Matter. And if the cross is only about an atoning sacrifice, then the life and teachings of Jesus take a back seat to that one moment. So why do we only hear about the one version of what the cross means? Well, the powers who were conquered in that moment of empire, religious elitism, and holding others down, they benefit from that toxic theology. And when we see that, we can see the truth that there have been horrors and terrors that have been done in the name of the cross and in the name of Jesus throughout history, some of which we are still experiencing today. And it is this dishonest reading of the Bible and the theology from it that have led faithful people down a path that has them justifying using Jesus' name to create empires, to create colonialism, to create all of the bad things that are attached to this idea around the cross. So this Good Friday, may you remember the truth of the true cross. That Christ died for you, but not to appease the anger of God, but in a final act of solidarity that said God will suffer all things to prove to you that they love you, to prove that it is possible to be liberated from the myth that others control your access to the divine, and once and for all to say that the powers of the world that offer peace through dominance are liars and have already been defeated. So may you enter into the mystery of a cruciformed life with solidarity and service to all of the world. May we begin to see the liberative theology that surrounds the cross and the act of love that God performs to say, I'll take on the worst of you and give you back more than the best of what you ever thought you could be. May this Good Friday finally be good news for you and not a time of going back to that old, dead theology left over from a time of exploitation and terror. May you be renewed this Holy Week As we go into Holy Saturday, may we contemplate the death of Christ so that we can experience and live into the liberation of Resurrection Sunday. May it be so.